This is Earl Purdy. Welcome to Facebook Live. Welcome to the Way of Mastery. Welcome to the Way of Mastery. This is Earl Purdy on Facebook Live. And this evening, in this presentation, we're going to cover from the Way of Transformation, Inner Silence, the Threshold of Wisdom Divine. This is the Way of Mastery. I'm Earl Purdy. I want to welcome my mighty companions. I want to welcome my mighty companions to the Way of Mastery. Inner Silence, the Threshold to Wisdom Divine, in the Way of Transformation, on page 262. We're going to be on page 262, in the Way of Mastery, page 262. In part 2, the Way of Transformation, lesson 22. Lesson 22, self-honesty, the greatest act of love. We're going to be doing the section, the inner silence, the threshold to wisdom divine. Remember, with the Way of Mastery, all my mighty companions want to ask you to share the video on your timeline so that we can get as many new mighty companions as possible to join us. Let me also get you on my iPad so that I'll be able to see all of your comments and be able to respond to them. I would like to ask you to take a breath right now as everyone is coming on. And we're going to be on page 262 in the Way of Mastery, the Way of Transformation. The section is called Inner Silence, the Threshold to Divine Wisdom. One of the most important things to remember is that you need not believe the ideas. And you need not accept the ideas. You need not even welcome the ideas. Some of the ideas, you may actively resist some of the ideas. Some of the ideas you may find hard to believe, and some of the ideas you may find quite startling. You are not asked to analyze and judge the ideas at all. It's the use of the ideas. It's using the ideas that will give the ideas meaning to you and will show you that the ideas are true. And we're going to start out with Inner Silence, the Threshold to Wisdom Divine. As my mighty companions, you know that as a teacher, I don't analyze. I don't spend my presentations analyzing the ideas. My goal is to bring the ideas to life so that we can hear the ideas. Do you know that one of the things that happen a lot is that people will start to analyze the ideas before they even let themselves hear the ideas? The very first sentence says, the theme of this lesson. What is the theme of this lesson? It's the cultivation of that inner silence, which is the threshold to wisdom divine. So what is the key? What is the key to having wisdom? What is the key to having wisdom? What is the key to having wisdom divine? The cultivation of that inner silence. In order to get in touch with your wisdom, in order to get in touch with your inner wisdom, it's going to be important that you cultivate being quiet, stilling your inner thoughts. To cultivate divine wisdom, you have to cultivate a silence on the inside. So the question is, how does the mind come to true silence? How does your mind come to true silence? So how does your mind come to true silence? It is not merely a matter of closing your mouth. Inner silence isn't just a matter of you not talking. Inner silence is not simply a matter of shutting out the noises of the world. Shutting out the noises of the world, that's not inner silence. And inner silence is certainly not a matter of ceasing to listen to others. Whether others are speaking words of praise to you, or whether others are speaking words of criticism, inner silence is not a matter of not listening to what others have to say. Actually, do you know that quite to the contrary, there's a lot of ways that silence can be cultivated. There are a lot of ways that inner silence can be cultivated. So what would inner silence look like at first? What would inner silence look like at first? Well, inner silence would look like something you do through the body. So if you're going to start out to have inner silence, then you begin to breathe deeply. So let's do that right now. Take a deep breath. Do that right now. Let's do it together. Breathe deeply. And with rhythm. Breathe deeply. You can cultivate inner silence by sitting next to an ocean or sitting beneath a tree, or you could actually become absorbed in the wind. Or do you know that another way that you could cultivate inner silence? You could practice a very ancient art. You could practice the ancient art of remaining silent without speaking as you go through your daily events. You could just practice being quiet as much as you can all day as you go through your daily events. So you can cultivate inner silence by talking as little as possible. Talk little as possible. Remain silent without speaking as you go through your daily events. Remain silent without thinking. So how do you cultivate the art of remaining silent? As much as possible, go about your daily events without speaking. That's another way that you cultivate silence. So if you breathe, if you sit silently out in nature or just quietly at your home, practice going about your daily events without speaking. All of these will begin to cultivate a relaxation within your brain. You want to cultivate a relaxation within your brain. You want to cultivate a relaxation in your nervous system. You want to cultivate a relaxation in your body. And don't forget that these things are just projections of your mind anyway. So, do you know that to still the body, to calm the body, to allow the activity in the brain, to allow the activity in the brain hemispheres to relax and allow the activity in your brain to become more harmonious? That is, in fact, an initial step in bringing the mind to silence, is to quiet the body, calm the body. So, I know that if you're watching this and you're with us live, you probably are just settling in after a day of activity. So your thoughts may be racing about right now as you are taking part in this Way of Mastery presentation. And the beauty of us being here live is that we can do what we're being told. And we can do what we are being told. We can do it together. So right now, just take a minute to quiet your body. Allow your brain to relax. Allow yourself to feel more harmonious, because that's the initial step in bringing the mind to silence. Now we're going to go far deeper, because far deeper than doing this is this. Listen to me, 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 listen to me. That genuine silence, which is indeed genuine silence, is the threshold to wisdom. And wisdom is nothing more than enlightenment. It requires the cultivation of deep self-honesty. You have to start being honest with yourself if you want to cultivate genuine silence, because genuine silence is the threshold to wisdom, and wisdom is nothing more than enlightenment. And if you're going to have enlightenment, what does enlightenment require? Enlightenment requires the cultivation of deep, deep, deep self-honesty. What is honesty? What is honesty? Well, honesty is that act in which your mind is no longer committed to hiding from its own darkness. If you're going to be honest with yourself, you're not going to try to hide from your own ego. You're going to look at your own darkness. If you're going to be truly self-honest, you have to be willing to look at your own ego. If you're going to be truly self-honest, you have to be committed to no longer hiding from your fear, no longer hiding from your guilt, no longer hiding from your own darkness. You have to stop pretending that you don't have an ego. You have to stop pretending that you don't have an ego. You have to stop pretending that you don't have fear and anger and grievances. You have to get honest with yourself. You have to be committed that you're not going to hide from your shadow side anymore. You're going to take a look at your own shadow. If you're going to be really honest, if I'm going to practice self-honesty, I have to be committed to no longer hiding from my own darkness and fear. I've said many times, and I've said in many ways, that it's necessary to enter into the blackness of the ego. You have to enter into the blackness of your own ego if you want to discover what you want no longer. If you really want to get clear about what it's time for you to release and let go of, you have to enter into the blackness of your own ego. You have to enter into the blackness of your own feelings of separation, feelings of anger, feelings of loneliness. You have to go deep into the blackness of your own ego so that you can get clear about what it is that you do not want any longer. In truth, if you're going to make a journey, deep into your own ego so that you can free yourself, for anyone who makes such a journey, that which the ego is the part of yourself that becomes repulsive. The ego is the part of your mind that becomes repulsive, repugnant, and hurtful to oneself. So the ego is the part of you that hurts you. The ego is the part of you that hurts you. So you've got to be willing to take a look at the part of you that hurts you. It's time to go into the blackness of the part of your mind that hurts you. You have to go deep and look at the part of you that's repulsive. You have to look at the part of your mind that is repugnant. You have to look at the part of your mind that hurts you. And that is the only thing, that's the only thing that matters, is that you practice deep self-honesty. That means you're willing to take a look at your own ego. You're willing to take a look at the part of your mind that is repulsive. You're willing to look at the part of your mind that is selfish. You're willing to look at the part of your mind that projects and blames. You're willing to look at your own mental darkness so that you can discover what you are ready to let go of. So there's something I want you to understand with me now. Listen to me. Therefore, understand that in the way of transformation, although we have covered a lot of territory in these lessons, a cornerstone of the universal curriculum, a cornerstone. What is the cornerstone? What is the cornerstone of the universal curriculum? It must always be the cultivation of a deep self-honesty. It's time to cultivate deep self-honesty. It's time to cultivate deep self-honesty. In self-honesty, would you like to know what happens in self-honesty? Well, when you are practicing self-honesty, one decides to simply observe the mind. It's time for you to observe the mind. You must observe your thinking. You must observe your thinking. It's time for you to observe your thinking. To simply observe the behavior. You have to observe the behavior that's flowing from your mind through your body. Observe the kind of behavior that you have. You have to observe the behavior that flows from the mind through the body as you gesture yourself out into the world. Do you know what true self-honesty requires? Listen to me, mighty companions. True self-honesty requires time. It's going to take time to be honest. True self-honesty requires time. Do you know why true self-honesty requires time? Because the ego is the attempt to replace honesty. The ego is the attempt to replace honesty. Your ego is the attempt to replace honesty and truth. What is the ego trying to replace honesty and truth with? The ego is trying to replace honesty and truth with dishonesty and falsity. Your ego is trying to replace the truth and honesty with dishonesty and falsity. So I want you to do something with me just for a minute. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are fully enlightened in this moment. Just imagine that you are fully enlightened in this moment. Now, what would that be like? I want you to imagine that you are abiding in a state of perfect freedom and a state of perfect peace. I want you to imagine that you are now living in a state of complete freedom. Imagine that you are living in a state of complete peace. Imagine you are at one with God. Imagine you are one with God. Imagine you are abiding in a state of perfect freedom and peace. Imagine that you are living in a state of perfect freedom and peace. Imagine you are at one with God. So, would there be anything that you would need to be dishonest with in your own mind? If you were really in a state of perfect freedom and perfect peace, if you were really aware that you are one with God, would there be anything that you would need to be dishonest about in your own mind? What corner of the mind would you have failed to embrace in light? Therefore, in truth, my beautiful, beloved friends, my beautiful, beloved, mighty companions, understand well. So what is it that you need to understand? You need to understand that the ego is the attempt to replace honesty with dishonesty. The ego is dishonest. The ego is dishonest. The ego is the dishonest part of the mind. The ego is the attempt to replace honesty with dishonesty. As a matter of fact, the ego is dishonesty. In fact, one could go so far as to say that those that would seek for the devil, those who look for the devil, all they need do is look only at the ego. In which case, the ego becomes egocentric. Your sense of identity is all wrapped up in defending and protecting a false image of yourself. Listen to me now. Listen. Your sense of identity is all wrapped up in defending and protecting a false image of yourself. Do you know that your sense of who you are is all wrapped up in defending and protecting a false image of yourself? Stop protecting a false concept of yourself. Stop Stop defending and protecting a false image of yourself. Now, there's a lot of resistance right now. There's a lot of resistance that's pervading your human domain, which is only this. No, the resistance takes the form of saying, no, I will not look honestly. I will not look honestly. I must uphold the image I need to believe is true about myself. That's what the resistance in you is saying. No, I will not look honestly. I must uphold the image I need to believe is true about myself. If you try to keep holding the image that you believe is true about yourself, even though you have no peace, even though you have no happiness, even though you have no joy, but you still want to protect the false image you have about yourself, I want you to know that that's not love. That's not the truth. Trying to uphold a false image of yourself. And how can you tell? How can you tell if you have a false image about yourself? It's real easy to tell if you have a false image about yourself. If you have a false image about yourself, you feel fear and conflict and a lack of peace. And that's how you can tell when you are protecting a false image of yourself. You feel anger, you feel weak, you feel lack, you feel guilty. If you feel any of those feelings, that's your ego. Your ego is in charge. It means that you have a false image about yourself that you are identifying with and protecting. So, you're right, Kim. The devil is a liar. And you're right, Jim. Which is insanity, thinking that I want that egocentric devil, quote unquote, instead of our one true love. We're saying devil because we're just talking about the part of us that believes in separation, fear, anger, and guilt. There's no such thing as an objective devil. So don't think that that's what we're saying when we bring up the term devil. Also, keep in mind that your ego is not real. Your ego does not exist as an independent entity. All of the negative, fearful things that you are thinking, you're the one that's thinking them. Those thoughts are not coming to you against your will. You are the one that's telling yourself whatever you are hearing. Whatever you're listening to, whatever thoughts you're listening to, whatever thoughts you're listening to, you're the one that's giving yourself those thoughts. And you need to be willing to take a look at all the thoughts that you have that may be hurting you and keeping you from having joy. You are always being made unhappy by your thoughts. It's only your own thoughts that harm you. It's only your own thoughts that's upsetting you. If you are depressed, it's because it's what you're telling yourself. The depression is not coming from the situation outside of yourself. The depression would be coming from what you are telling yourself. That's why it's so important for you to get honest with yourself. Also, that's right, Joanne. It's about observing your thinking. Observing your thinking. So now we're at the point in our spiritual development where we have to learn how to shut up and be quiet, take deep breaths, not speak a whole lot, and allow yourself to cultivate the inner wisdom. And the inner wisdom comes from self-honesty. And self-honesty comes from a willingness to look at your own shadow side, to take a look at your own fear, your own anger, your own unconsciousness, your own guilt. That is the key to cultivating inner silence. That is the key to allowing yourself to have inner peace. That's right, Jerry. It is your thoughts alone that cause you pain. Okay. Now, we're going to do an exercise. We're going to do an exercise in self-honesty. So I want you to take a minute. We're going to cultivate deep self-honesty. And we're going to cultivate the self-honesty by answering these questions. Ask yourself this question. Be honest with yourself. Ask yourself this question. Have I ever had a murderous thought? Have I ever had a murderous thought? Have I ever wanted to murder somebody? Have I ever wanted someone dead? Have I ever wished someone dead? Have I ever had a murderous thought? Ask yourself, have I ever had a murderous thought? The next question to ask yourself, we are practicing honesty now. Get honest with yourself. Ask yourself, have I ever manipulated another man in order to try to gain what I believe I needed? Have you ever tried to manipulate anybody else in order to get something that you want? Have you ever tried to manipulate anyone else in order to get something that you want from them? Have you ever tried to manipulate a situation or a person so that you could gain what you believe you needed? Have I ever manipulated another man in order to try to gain what I believe I needed? Yes, I have. Have I ever had a murderous thought? Have I ever had a murderous thought? Yes, I have. Have I ever withdrawn love for the subtle reason of causing hurt and trying to cause hurt to others? Have I ever withdrawn my love for anybody? Have I ever withdrawn my love from somebody to hurt them or to make them feel pain in some way? Yes, I have. Have I ever had disrespectful sexual fantasies? Have I ever had disrespectful sexual fantasies? Yes, I have. Have I ever hated the world? Have I ever hated the world? Yes, I have. Have I ever despised myself? Have I ever despised myself? Yes, I have. Have you ever had a murderous thought? Have you ever manipulated another person in order to try to gain what you believe you need? Have you ever withdrawn love for the subtle reason of causing hurt or trying to cause hurt to another? Have you ever had disrespectful sexual fantasies? Have you ever hated the world? Have you ever despised yourself? And last, but surely not least, for in truth, if you would consider it, all of those questions emanate out of one question. All those questions are a reflection of one question. And the one question is, have I ever hated God? Have I ever hated God? Have I ever hated God? I remember when I was a child, and I grew up in the segregated South, and when I was a child, there was segregation. And so there were separate water fountains for beings with black bodies and separate entrances for restaurants, and it didn't seem like there were as many opportunities for me because I was a black child. And I can remember wondering what I had done to make God so angry as a child that I would be dealing with what appeared to be prejudice and oppression just because of the color of my skin. There were separate water fountains. And I can remember as a child going out in the backyard and cursing God, saying, I hate you, God, for creating me as a child that's dealing with these kinds of prejudices and oppressions, and I didn't understand why. So I had a period where I hated God. I thought God wasn't loving, and I was taught that God punished and that God condemned. So have I ever hated God? You doggone right. There has been a time in my life that I have hated God. So in perfect honesty, if a person was to really and truly be honest, the answer to each of those questions can only be yes. If a person would really be honest, the answer to each of those questions can only be yes. The honest man looks upon all that has arisen within it. How? Without judgment. So when you look at the ego in your mind, when you look at the fear and the hate and the anger in your mind, you must look at it without judgment. So in order to pull off the self-honesty, don't condemn yourself for your anger, your hate, your selfishness, your grievances. Don't hate yourself. Don't judge what comes up to be released. As you look at yourself with self-honesty, don't take out the psychic sledgehammer and beat yourself up. You have to look at the things that are coming up in your mind from your ego that needs to be released. You must look at it without judgment, because there can be no honesty where there is judgment. There can't be any honesty. Where there's judgment, there can't be any honesty. Where there's judgment, there can't be any honesty. So I want you to think well upon the questions that I have just asked you. And then when you think about the questions, when you look at the questions that we just had, I want you to take it a step further. Take it a step further. And I want you to ask yourself, has any of that type of thing, has any of the anger, hate, grievances, blame, projection, has that occurred in your mind recently? Have you recently had any fear? Have you recently been dishonest? Have you recently been angry? Have you recently felt guilty? Have you recently thought of yourself as lacking? Have you recently thought of yourself as separate? Has any of that type of thinking occurred within your mind recently? Now, notice what happens now. I want you to pay attention to your mind, and I want you to pay attention to your mind, and even into your body and breath. Pay attention to your mind, pay attention to your body, pay attention to your breath. Pay attention to your mind, pay attention to your body, pay attention to your breath. Pay attention to your mind, pay attention to your body, pay attention to your breath. So what occurs as you begin to get closer to the truth? What occurs as you begin to get closer to the truth? As you begin to get closer to the truth, what occurs as you begin to get closer and closer and closer and closer to the truth? What occurs as you begin to get closer to the truth? Do you notice as you begin to get closer to the truth, do you notice a little bit of restlessness as you begin to get closer to the truth? Do you recognize that as we do this, your mind is getting more and more active with all kinds of chatter? Are you finding that as we do these exercises, the thoughts in your mind are kind of racing? Decide for silence. So let's say that for a minute. Let's say that for a minute. I decide for silence. 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 I decide for peace. 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 So where does healing occur? Healing occurs to the depth, and healing occurs to the degree you're going to have peace. You're going to have healing to the degree that your mind is willing to embrace everything that's inside your mind. So you have to get to the point that you will embrace all of your thoughts without judgment. You have to get to the point, if you want to heal, if you really want to have peace, then you have to be willing to embrace everything that's occurring within your mind. You must stop judging any of your thoughts. You must embrace all of your thoughts, even the thoughts that you think of as your ego thoughts. But you just don't follow the advice of your ego thoughts. You don't follow the advice of your fear thoughts, your anger thoughts, your attack thoughts, your guilt thoughts. But you do embrace those thoughts, and you don't judge those thoughts, because your mind is going to heal to the degree that you're willing to embrace everything that you're thinking in your mind. Do you know that denial, that's what causes separation? Denial is what causes you to think that there's a separation between your little self and your great self. It's denial that causes separation. Makes you think that there's a separation between you and me, and that there's a separation between yourself from God. Therefore, the very peace that your mind seeks through religious beliefs is impossible. The peace that a man would seek through religion alone is impossible. As long as the mind is in denial about itself, then the very peace that you're seeking through religious beliefs is impossible, as long as your mind is in denial about itself. Now, Yeshua, Jesus, is about to talk to us right now. So I'll share what the Way of Mastery says. It says, rest assured, Jesus says, Yeshua says, rest assured, when I walked upon your planet as a man, I too often became quite frustrated at the Pharisees, who would stand on the corner in their long, beautiful robes, professing religious belief. They had their just reward. That is why I, Yeshua, often said, beware of those who come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. For the dishonest mind is in conflict constantly. So if you have a dishonest mind, does that mean that you are in conflict all the time? That's exactly what we were just told. The dishonest mind is in conflict constantly. So if you have a mind that's in conflict constantly, if you're in conflict constantly, you have a dishonest mind. You're not looking at your mind. You're not observing your mind. You're not going deeply within the blackness of your own ego. You're in denial. If you're in conflict constantly, you have a dishonest mind. If you're in conflict all the time, you have a dishonest mind. And a dishonest mind, what's the characteristics of a dishonest mind? A dishonest mind splits itself off from its sexuality as a human being. What? I'll say it again. A dishonest mind splits itself off from its sexuality as a human being. A dishonest mind splits itself off from its anger, its sadness, its hurt, and its murderous thoughts. The dishonest mind is in conflict constantly. The dishonest mind splits itself off from its sexuality as a human being. A dishonest mind splits itself off from its sexuality as a human being. The dishonest mind splits itself off from its anger, its sadness, its hurt, and its murderous thoughts. The dishonest mind splits itself off from its murderous thoughts. But the mind that is healed, the mind that is healed, the mind that is healed has learned. What is it that the mind that is healed has learned? The mind that is healed has learned to turn and embrace every subtle shadow within the mind. If you have a healed mind, you are embracing all of your ego thoughts. If you have a healed mind, you embrace all your thoughts. If you have a healed mind, you embrace your anger, you embrace your sadness, you embrace your hurts, you embrace your murderous thoughts, you embrace the part of you that's cut off from your sexuality, you embrace the thoughts in your mind that cause you conflict. If you are a mind that's healed, you are a mind that doesn't judge any of your thoughts and embraces all of your thoughts. If you have a healed mind, you embrace your thoughts without judgment, because love alone embraces all things. I say love alone, trust all things. Love alone allows all things. Love alone allows all things. Love alone transcends all things. Love alone transcends all things. And needs no longer live in fear that those things can run it. So listen. Love embraces all your thoughts. Love embraces all your feelings. Love trusts all things. Love allows all things. Love transcends all things. Enlightenment. What is enlightenment? What is enlightenment? What is enlightenment? What is enlightenment? Enlightenment is a state in which the world, and the world is not outside you. The world is not outside your mind. The world is not outside you. The world is not outside your mind. The world is not outside you. The world is not outside you. The world is not outside your mind. What you see is not outside your mind. Nothing you see is outside of your mind. Nothing you see is outside of your mind. The world is not outside of you. The world is not outside of you. The world is not outside of you. The world is the context. The world is the thoughts. The world is the images and perceptions that you have attracted to yourself. Your world is the context. Have you considered that your world is the context, the thoughts, the images, the perceptions that you have attracted to yourself? That's your world. So the world can no longer hold power over you. The reason why the world can no longer hold power over you is because the world is made up of your thoughts. Your world is made up of your images. Your world is made up of your perceptions. And so the world can no longer hold any power over you. Now, that doesn't mean that the world ceases to exist. It doesn't mean that the world ceases to exist. This has been the great era of religion as opposed to spirituality. Religion, what is religion? What is religion? What is religion? What is religion? Religion will give you a set of beliefs. Religion will give you a set of ideas about yourself. Religion will give you standards that you must achieve. Religion is something that gives you a set of beliefs and ideas about yourself. Religion gives you a set of beliefs and ideas about yourself. The religion gives you standards that you must achieve. And so therefore, the temptation will be for your mind to conclude that if I am to be a spiritual person, see, I cannot be angry if I'm going to be a spiritual person. If I'm a spiritual person, I can't have sexual fantasies about my nature. I can't have sexual fantasies about my neighbor if I'm going to be a spiritual person. If I'm going to be a spiritual person, I can't get angry and upset. If I'm going to be a spiritual person, I can't dance and go to parties. If I'm a spiritual person, so your mind comes up with all these ideas. One of the things that I've found to sometimes be a challenge for me as a quote-unquote spiritual teacher is that somehow people think because I'm a spiritual teacher that I'm not going to have the same feelings and desires that anyone else would have. That somehow that means I'm not supposed to express sexuality, sensuality, passion. You're not ever supposed to say quote-unquote curse words, a party, a dance, or people have all these projections that they want to put on you when you say you are a spiritual teacher. Sometimes when you do things like I'm doing, people judge you more harshly than they do anyone else. They expect you to live up to standards that they themselves don't have the slightest desire to live up to. But you know what? I don't buy into any of that. I'm going to be myself. I don't care what other people think of me, because I know I am a holy child of God and you're a holy child of God. And I don't have to live according to your sets of standards and beliefs, and you don't have to live according to mine. So I don't buy into if I am to be a spiritual person, it means I can't be angry. That if I'm going to be a spiritual person, I can't have sexual fantasies. All of that is false. All of that is absolutely false. Because in reality, the experience in your domain, in reality, the experience in your domain is one in which the mind was created and is aware of things unlike love. In the experience of this domain that we have created, we are aware of things that do not reflect love. So the mind has split itself off from love. And then the mind, when it splits itself off from love, it projects an image called the ego to itself first, and obviously to others, that it most wants to believe is true. In this domain, in this realm that we are in, that our mind has created, in this experience, in this domain that we're in, we are aware of all things that are different from love. That's because our minds have split itself off. Our mind has split itself off from the loving part of our mind. and we have projected an image that's called the ego. So we project the image of our ego to ourselves first, and then we project the image of our ego or fear to others. You are always projecting what you most want to believe is true. You are always seeing what you want to believe is true. You are always seeing what you want to believe is real. You are always seeing what you want to believe is real. You are always seeing what you want to believe is real. You are always seeing what you want to believe is real. You are always seeing what you most want to believe is true. You are always seeing what you most want to believe is true. You are always seeing what you want to believe. You are always seeing what you want to believe. You are always seeing what you want to believe. You are always seeing what you want to believe. You are always seeing what you want to believe. You are always seeing what you want. Say it to yourself. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. I am always seeing what I want to believe. So the question you must ask yourself is, what is it that you want to see? What is it that you want to believe? Because you are always seeing what you want to believe. But remember what? You must remember that belief is not knowledge. Because you believe something, it doesn't mean that it's true. Just because you see what you believe, it doesn't mean that what you're seeing is true. You see what you want to believe, but that doesn't mean it's knowledge. That doesn't mean it's the absolute truth. You see, it's only knowledge alone that allows the mind to observe what arises within the mind without judgment. Knowledge is the only thing that allows your mind to observe what's coming up in your mind without judgment, without fear. And most of all, you must look at the things that are coming up in your mind to be released. You have to look at those things without identifying with it. You may have angry thoughts, but you are still a loving being. You may have a mind that's full of insecurity and fear and jealousy, but you are still a loving being. Don't identify with the negative, fearful thoughts in your mind. Don't identify with any negative and fearful thoughts in your mind. Knowledge will allow you to observe what's going on in your mind without identifying with what's going on in your mind. If you know that you are love, if you know that you are spirit, if you know that you are love, if you know that you are spirit, if you know that you are love, we suffer in spite of following Jesus because we're still thinking our crappy, fearful, separate, guilty thoughts. We're still judging each other and seeing each other's. We are only suffering because of the thoughts in our minds. That's the only reason why we're still suffering. So you're right. And you're not truly following Jesus if you're suffering. You think you're following Jesus if you're suffering. You're not really following any of the great wisdom teachers if you're suffering. Because the great wisdom teachers have told us, just like the way a master is telling us, the ways to think that will get rid of our suffering. So it's not a real big mystery why we suffer, even though we say we're followers of Jesus. We're suffering because we're still thinking incorrectly. We're still seeing ourselves as separate from God. We're still not extending love. We're still not taking responsibility for our experience. We're not victims. Jesus was a way shower. The great spiritual teachers were all showing us the way. But if we don't do what they say, then we're going to suffer, even though it's totally unnecessary. There's a part of the mind that loves to suffer. That's a way to be special. That's a way to stand out. There's a part of the mind that believes it's through suffering that we become more loving. So it's our belief system. And knowledge alone allows the mind to observe what arises within it without judgment, without fear, and without identifying with it. It looks upon the world in perfect forgiveness and says, you know what? I just had a murderous thought. When you really have a healed mind, when you really have a forgiving mind, you'll be able to say stuff like, I just had a murderous thought. I just had a picture of hitting my employer over the head with a sledgehammer and watching the blood spurt through the broken skull. Oh yes, well, just another thought arising and passing away. You go, oh, I just had another ego thought. Okay. Oh, I just had another murderous thought. Oh, I just had another anger thought. Oh, I just had another thought of jealousy. Oh, I just had another thought of unhappiness and sadness. When your mind heals, you will have all of these thoughts, but there won't be any big deal. You'll see those thoughts, but you won't condemn yourself for having those thoughts. You'll just say, oh, this is just another thought arising and passing away in my mind. This thought that I'm not enough, that I'm insecure, that I'm not lovable, this thought doesn't change the truth of who I am. Your ego thoughts don't change the truth of who you are. Your ego thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your angry thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your murderous thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your guilt thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your selfish thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your lack thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your sickness thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. Your separation thoughts do not change the truth of who you are. And you are free to extend love to the person that you have a murderous thought about, or you're free to hit them with a hammer. But every thought, every action has a consequence. So that's why you only want to extend peace. Only extend peace. The mind that is free. So how do you know if your mind is free? How do you know if your mind is free? How do you know if your mind is free and at peace? How do you know? How do you know if your mind is free and at peace? How do you know your mind is free and at peace? You will know that your mind is free. You will know that your mind is free and at peace when your mind is no longer conflicted within itself. So that means you will know that your mind is free when you are no longer in conflict. When you're no longer in conflict, that's when you know your mind is free. When you're no longer in conflict, your mind is free. When you're no longer in conflict, your mind is free. When you're no longer in conflict, your mind is at peace. Now, what happens when your mind is unconflicted? What happens when your mind is unconflicted? When your mind is unconflicted, your mind will live in perfect vulnerability. Your mind, when it's at peace, your mind has learned to embrace. When your mind is at peace, your mind has learned to accept the truth. When your mind is at peace, it means your mind has accepted the truth about the phenomena of the mind itself in this dream world. So what do I mean? What do I mean? What I'm telling you is this, that when your mind is willing to begin to be honest, when your mind is willing to, when you're willing to begin to be honest, when you're willing to cultivate deeper honesty with everyone around you, do you know that when you're willing to be completely honest and to be deeply, and when I say be completely honest, I'm talking about being honest about the truth, not honest about you don't like somebody's pants or shoes or their haircut. We're not talking at that meaningless level. We're talking at the level of being honest about you being an innocent, powerful child of God. You are a creator of your experience, that you are not a victim of the world you see. that you admit you have some fears and guilts and upsets you need to go past. We're talking about deep soul honesty. We're not talking about being honest about you were upset about what time somebody came home last night for dinner. Hopefully you're on another level of consciousness, that you recognize that we are talking on a much deeper level than that. In other words, when you are honest, there is no longer any kind of pretense. When you're truly honest, no longer is there manipulation or control when you are truly honest. When you're truly honest, there is no unconscious split off energy actually running the show. When you are honest, there's no split off energy running the show when you're honest. Even though the mind seems to be oblivious to it, there is no unconscious split-off energy actually running the show. Do you know that the mind that's in conflict with itself, the mind in conflict with itself is dangerous to itself. The mind in conflict with itself is dangerous to itself. And of course, by extension, a mind that's in conflict with itself is always and also a mind that is dangerous to everyone else in all dimensions. So a mind that's in conflict is dangerous to itself. Therefore, my beloved mighty companions, beware of those that come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Beware. In other words, beware of the viciousness of the ego within your own mind. Beware of the viciousness of the false identity, the false image you have of yourself within your own mind. Beware of the viciousness of the fearful, guilty thoughts that are within your own mind. Beware of the viciousness of the ego within your own mind. So how does the ego come to you in sheep's clothing? Does it minimize hurtful behaviors? Does it minimize what is truly merely a lack of self-responsibility? Does it always make excuses why your life is not progressing in a way of becoming more and more empowered to bring forth Christ, which is love? So what is it that you need to cultivate? What is it that you need to cultivate? Learn to cultivate self-honesty. 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 Though it sounds like a simple thing, I'm telling you, it does take time, simply because the mind has used its own power to be in denial about its own creations. There's a part of your mind that doesn't want to own that you are the one that's responsible for how you see everything and experience everything in your life. There's a part of your mind that may not want to own up that you are the one that's responsible for how you are experiencing your life. You are responsible for what you see in your perceptions, because your mind is determining how you see things. There's a part of your mind that may not want to embrace things that you see in your life. It wants very much for you and itself to believe that there's a part of you that wants to believe that you are a very high spiritual being, even though you know you have some anger, you know you have some guilt, you know you have some grievances, you know it's some people you may not like, but there's a part of your mind that wants you to believe that you're this really high spiritual being and wants you to be in denial about the part of you that's not so nice. Your ego will wear the sheep's clothing. Your ego is the persona. Your ego is the mask. Your ego is the self-image, your projected image into the social world. And it will cling to that like a robe around the body, held against the cold winter wind, and it will cling to your old self-image no matter what. Such a mind that is in denial that it is the creator of its experience. Such a mind that projects all of its anger and guilt out on others. Such a mind that is not honest and in conflict. Such a mind is an insane mind. And do you know that an insane mind is a hurtful mind? An insane mind limits the flow of love. Hear me now. An insane mind limits the flow of love through it that could heal this world. So when you're in your insane mind, you limit the flow of love, and it's only the flow of love that can heal this world. Therefore, beloved friends, beloved friends, beloved friends, beloved friends, beloved friends, beloved friends, take a breath. As we move toward the close of the way of transformation, we again begin to turn the arrow back to point to ourselves. We point at the depth of the mind. Learn to observe your mind. Take the list of questions that we have offered unto you and simply repeat the process of everything that we have covered so far on a daily basis. So you see, we first begin in the safety of allowing you to look way into the past to see if any of that has ever been going on in your mind. Because now we come closer and closer to the self-honesty of what's occurring in the mind right here and right now. So that each day you ask the same questions, and each day you will see what the answer is. In this way, your mind will become more and more transparent. So what does that mean for you to have a transparent mind? It means you will learn to look upon your murderous thoughts, and you will learn to look upon all of those hideous and unspiritual things that you have tried to shove down into the basement more and more as you tell yourself the truth about what's in your mind, and more as you find a friend or two willing to tell the truth about their own minds with you. The more the mind becomes transparent, the less and less you have any need to hide as your mind becomes more and more transparent. A mind no longer committed to hiding, that mind becomes transparent to itself. And through a mind that is transparent, the power of Christ, the power of love can move through a mind that has become honest and transparent. The Christ, the love, the true self can begin to move with certainty, with knowledge, with grace, and with compassion. That's what you are going to do. Mighty companions, take a breath. Embrace every thought that you have in your mind without judgment. Practice self-honesty practice self-honesty with yourself. This is the way that you get to inner silence. This is the way that you get through to the peace that you've been longing for all your life. It's by being honest about all of your thoughts, not just your best dressed thoughts. Don't project your fearful, negative, selfish, angry thoughts. Don't project them out and then say they are somebody else's thoughts. Be willing to cultivate self-honesty. That's where you cultivate. That's the way that you cultivate inner silence. Like when you say, how can I forget the horrible moments in my life? The way that you forget the horrible moments in your life is to focus on gratitude now. The way you can forget horrible moments in your past is to focus on the truth right now. You can't hold two thoughts in your mind at the exact same time. So if you're thinking about truth, God, and love, and your power and your connection to spirit right now, then you are not going to be focusing on the horrible thoughts from the past. The only thing that is ever hurting you are the thoughts that you're thinking in the present moment. And if you use this present moment to think about horrible things that happened to you in the past, then you're going to experience the result of thinking about the horrible things that happened to you in the past. So the way that you forget the horrible things that happened to you in the past is you allow yourself to look at those thoughts and not judge yourself for having those thoughts. This section that we have covered has given us very specific instructions about how to deal with the ego, how to deal with the past, how to deal with our anger. You don't have to figure it out. This teaching tonight in detail told you how to deal with your ego, how to be honest with yourself. But the only way that it's going to help you is to listen to it over and over and hear what it's saying and do what it's saying. I've been teaching close to 40 years. Trust me, the reason why students have such a hard time or a failure rate when they study stuff like this is not really very complex. You don't actually think the way that it's telling you to think, and you don't actually do what it's telling you to do. And if you don't do that, if you don't think the way it's telling you to think, you are not going to get the results that it promises. And you are in control of your thought. You're the one that determines what you're going to think and believe. So you can either choose to think about the past and everything that makes you feel separate and upset, or you can choose to think about the truth that we're learning through the way of mastery and apply those truths to yourself and watch the blessings and miracles start to happen in your life in ways that you could never imagine. Mighty companions, I'm going to do one or two little quick things to complete. I'm a full-time teacher, so thank you for being a part of my teaching ministry. If you would like to, I would like to ask you to make a financial expression of appreciation. You can do that at www.earlpurdy.com. Purdy, P-U-R-D-Y. earlpurdy.com. You can make a financial expression of appreciation, and thank you for doing that. And those of you who have done that, thank you very much. I really appreciate you realizing that this is what I do in the world, just like you have things that you do in the world to allow income to come into your life. I do this. So thank you. Thank you for seeing value in what I do. Go to earlpurdy.com. I am also available for one-on-one consultations and clarity sessions, as I call them, that I've been doing for many, many years to show people how to apply this to the situations and circumstances in their life so that they can get past the blocks and have the kind of life they've always wanted to have. go to my website, earlpurdy.com, and it explains under the section called Clarity Sessions exactly what I do, and I'd love to work with you. I also want to let you know that I am also available for mentoring and personally working with you with the material itself. And I'm also an astrologer and numerologist, and I bring everything that I've learned into my sessions with people. And you can now book appointments with me right there online. I have a system that allows people to self-book appointments with me. I also have hundreds and hundreds of videos of my classes on my website, audio and video, that you can listen to on A Course in Miracles, A Way of Mastery, and A Course of Love. On YouTube, I have over 1,000 videos. I want to be truly helpful. That's why I'm here. My next Facebook Live presentation is on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, what I call Hardcore Course in Miracles for Course in Miracles students. And on Sundays at 1 o'clock, I do another Course in Miracles online Facebook class that's also in front of a live audience. And then, of course, on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we do The Incredible Way of Mastery together. At www.facebook.com, Earl Purdy Live on the Earl Purdy page on Facebook. Spread the word, mighty companions. I love your comments. I always read your comments, and sometimes I respond. But I want you to know that I am with you, and I want us to do this together. So let's finish this up. Let's take a couple of minutes to bring this home. Do you know that when your mind is free and at peace, you can tell? How can you tell if your mind is free and at peace? Your mind will no longer be in conflict with itself. And do you know that the mind that is unconflicted abides in perfect vulnerability? It has learned to embrace and accept the truth. Do you know that the mind that is unconflicted and healed is willing to begin to be honest, to cultivate deeper honesty with everyone around them? When your mind is silent and healed, it no longer practices pretense, no longer is there manipulation or control. When your mind is healed, all you know is love. I love you, mighty companions. You all are awesome. Please share this video, this class on your timeline, so that other brothers and sisters can also learn from it. You all are blessings. I love you so much. Thank you for being in my life. Thank you for being God. Thank you for being a part of me.